something you're going to hear a lot over the next week or so, and may have heard it in the past week, is Title 42. We know that it is set to expire next week, but we really want to know more about the impact and exactly what Title 42 even is. I do want to bring in Ernesto Castañeda, the director of the Immigration Lab at American University. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
Good morning, Josh.
Good morning. So what exactly is Title 42?
Yeah, so Title 42 is part of the U.S. Code. It's the Title 42, that's where its name comes from, and that's the area of the U.S. Code that talks about public health, among other things. This is a law that was put in the books in the 40s to deal with the pandemic of influenza around World War II. And it allows the federal government to bar the entry to foreigners in order to stop the spread of a contagious disease like influenza, like COVID. So in March 2022, the Trump administration put it in place to address the issue of COVID. And it wasn't only, remember that a lot of the airplanes and a lot of the flights coming from China, Europe, and many other countries were put on a hold for a while. Also the entry at the southern border, even people with visas, people that work or go to school in the US side, they couldn't come in from Mexico, for example. And then what happened after things got better with COVID and the restrictions were lifted is that many of these things were reopened, but the US has still been sending people back that are trying to immigrate, particularly people that are asking for asylum. Asylum is a law coming also from World War II, that when people come for particular situations, escaping government prosecution, if they're journalists and they have death threats from the governments, if they're escaping organized crime, or they're escaping totalitarian regimes like we saw in the Soviet Union during the pogrom era, or people escaping the Iron Curtain, they will be welcome in countries in the West, in Europe, in the United States, in Canada. That's called asylum, and that's a legal way for people to come in, and that stopped in March 22 with the pandemic, and it's still in place. And on December 21st, it will be lifted, so asylum seekers can again come and present their cases to immigration judges.
And you kind of talked about this, but what exactly is the Biden administration going to do with Title 42? Because we know this has been going on, I would say, all throughout the year, where it was set to expire, then it didn't. So what is the Biden administration planning to do?
Well, the main thing is that we'll go back to before the pandemic. So things will go back to the way they were with Bush, with Obama, with Trump, and people could come and ask for asylum, and many have done it through the years. So we're going back to that status quo, like we no longer have to use masks in schools. Also, Title 42 being lifted means going back to the way we did things at the beginning of the Trump administration in terms of having somebody come to the border. They have to go through an interview with an expert from the government to show that they have what is called a credible case, that they have evidence or a story that shows that they are really truly escaping persecution, and then they're given a court order, a date to show up to immigration officials. So that's what's normally been done for over 60 years. A lot of people have kept trying to do that while the pandemic was going on, while Title 42 was in place, and that's why we have had almost 1 million people sent back to Mexico to wait there until Title 42 is lifted. So we're going to see a lot of people applying in the next months, but then things should go back to normal and again go back to the previous status quo.
And opponents of this whole situation that's going to happen next week have said time and time again that they believe once this is lifted, you will see just an influx of people coming in, crowding cities. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like for many things, the pandemic put a stop on regular flows. Let's remember that during the pandemic, we couldn't get weights, we couldn't get bicycles, a lot of things there was a bottleneck for them to have free trade. So the same thing happened with people asking for asylum. They've been waiting for over a year in Mexico. Now they're going to come forward. And what is important to see, and what we see in the images, is that people are lining up. People are not trying to rush the Border Patrol. We're talking about people that want to present themselves to border authorities so they have a legal case open so they can stay in the U.S. legally. So that's what we're going to see. The thing about them staying in the streets is that because asylum seekers are not given a work permit, They cannot just come in and go see their family and start working and paying their bills. They have to first see the lawyers and get permission to work, and that takes some months. And traditionally, for example, in El Paso, there's been a couple of shelters that have welcomed these people that have no place to go, and they give them a place to sleep for a couple of nights, a couple of weeks, until they go and meet family members in Washington, in New York City, in Chicago, in LA, wherever they are going. Because most of them already have family members here that are going to provide them shelter and food. So the situation of seeing people in the streets is temporary. And again, it's not something that we haven't seen before. Homelessness is an issue in El Paso, for example, forever. I've done work on that. There's around 1,000 people that are homeless in El Paso for the last decade. So yes, we should help them more, but it doesn't mean that immigrants are going to end up in the streets asking for money for years on end. Immigrants are underrepresented amongst the homeless in the overall population in any city in America. So it's just a temporary situation that they are facing, sleeping in the elements. But they were already doing that in Mexico, sleeping in camps.
And you did touch on this as well, but what do you expect to see across the country when Title 42 is lifted?
We will see little by little an uptick in the number of migrants. Also, with the pandemic, we have seen a population decrease in the U.S. We saw a lot of deaths, over 1 million of them with the pandemic. We saw a decrease in legal and undocumented migration because of many issues dealing with the pandemic. And what we see throughout the United States right now is that construction, restaurants, agriculture, and many, many other small and large businesses cannot find enough people. So it'll be great, and it's been great that big American corporations are giving jobs to people coming from Afghanistan that help the U.S. in the war effort, people from Ukraine that are escaping the war from Russia. And the same could happen with refugees that are in very low numbers in the last couple of years, and asylum seekers can also come and work in our economy. So having migration go up little by little is only going to help the American economy keep its growth rate of around 2%.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Is there anything else that you want to add before we let you go?
Yes, that we shouldn't panic that the Title 42 is ending. It's a way to go back to the legal commitments that the U.S. has according to U.S. immigration law and international law to accept the people that are escaping persecution, genocide, and are fearing for their lives. And we have been able historically to give them a home here.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.